Len can do a quick welcome also.
Sure. Thank you so much, Hallie. I'm Len Catardo. I'm Senior Director of Human Resources and Professional Development at the Georgia Tech Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our latest professional development webinar. We are incredibly pleased to have Hallie Crawford back. She's been a longtime supporter of Georgia Tech and engaged in the life of our alumni, and provided a lot of fantastic assistance and support to alumni making career changes, and who just want to grow their careers in a different way. So we're really fortunate to have her here today, and welcome her to a Georgia Tech professional development program. Thank you, Hallie.
Thanks, Len. Greatly appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. As Len said, we greatly appreciate it. We know that there is just so much going on in the world, and as a result in our world. So we greatly appreciate your time being here, first of all. And second of all, as well, we are doing these obviously to help you all as much as possible, because we know working from home and just everything else that's going on in the world, that there's a lot of struggles that we're facing, especially career-wise. So we're going to talk today about 10 ways that newer managers can work towards advancing in their careers. And just as a quick reminder for everybody, this webinar is being recorded. And Len and I were just talking about this, how we all want to get back to business as usual as quickly as possible. And so they have hired a couple of new people, even during this time of working remotely, just to kind of put a positive note out there. We have had clients get hired for new jobs in the past several weeks. Our clients who are in job search mode, they're getting contacted by recruiters and employers. So things are moving forward and happening. And so we don't want you to stop thinking about your career advancement just because of everything else going on and COVID, et cetera. So this is a perfect time in some ways to be talking about how to advance your career and think about it, especially if you're a newer manager and now, oh my gosh, we're working remotely. How do we handle and deal with that? So just a really quick intro to me. I'm Hallie Crawford. I'm a certified career coach. We are based here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been coaching and training for just over 19 years now. I know some of you may be thinking, she sounds like she's 12. I just have a really young voice, good or bad there, actually 47. And just like everyone else, just as a quick heads up, and then we'll get started on our presentation. But I am working from home like everybody else is, and I have kids and dog in the background. So if you hear a dog barking or whatever, we'll deal with that as best as we can, and just appreciate your patience in advance. Len and I were talking about this too earlier. The good thing about working remotely like this, and I would actually say this as part of our content today, is that people are more able to kind of get to know each other a little bit better from the personal angle, because we're seeing like what's on, our wall in our office, or by what we're wearing, if we're wearing a more casual shirt or whatever. One of our clients was talking with his manager, and the guy was wearing casual Hawaiian shirt or something, and they had a conversation about it. So in a way, one of the positive things for your employees as a new manager is you can get to know people in a sense in a more personal way, because you're going to see their dog or their kid come across the screen or whatever it is. So that's one of the good things. So let's talk about, one of our first kind of issues, and one of the first things I wanted to say is that because we've been coaching professionals on their career for over 19 years now, we really do understand all of the feelings that we're all having, especially during this time. We totally understand for new managers, because we coach them all day long, how it feels to be in over your head, or if you feel that way. We also understand how it feels if you are kind of thinking that you're a fraud and you're not really sure what you're doing as a new manager. This is totally understandable and normal as well. We get it if you feel unsure how to be successful in your career long term. And as part of this, if you feel overwhelmed with new responsibilities, please know that you are not alone. These are all very normal feelings. And even myself, when I started my coaching practice a long time ago, and I started hiring and creating a team, I was a new manager too. And I had no idea what I was doing. And in a way, I've kind of, trial by fire learned over time. So you're not alone in this. Becoming a new manager, and especially if you're working remotely these days, like most of us are, it can be really stressful. If you take a look at the next slide here, according to a recent study, approximately 6 out of 10 managers said that becoming a boss for the first time was second in stress level only to a divorce. It's pretty high up there in terms of being stressful. So please know, if this is overwhelming to you in any way, shape, or form, you are not alone. It's normal. That's why we're talking today. And we want you to take these 10 tips that we're going to be discussing and take them kind of in order of priority, like that each one builds on the other one. But what I would recommend as we go here today is to pick out 2 or 3 of the advice and tips that you think are going to be the most relevant for you long term to start working on those first. So the things that we talked about just a minute ago about feeling overwhelmed, etc., that's the tough part about being a new manager. But the good news is that you can take control of what you're doing as a new manager. And we recommend you start developing your strategic career plan now, how to get your sea legs, if you will. Okay, so it is possible to methodically, slowly, and purposefully become better and more comfortable as a new manager. We have a great success or satisfaction rating with our clients when we coach them on how to develop more effective management skills. And especially we're doing that today to help them understand how to manage people more effectively remotely too. So we're going to sprinkle in some of that advice here as well. One of the things that I did want to point out on this slide here is, because of the coronavirus and everything going on in the world, we are pumping out as much relevant, useful, pertinent information as possible during these times to help you guys. On our career blog here, if you check that out, we are blogging more frequently with very timely topics. So if you need additional assistance with anything career-wise, please check that out. And the other thing that I would do as well is connect with me on LinkedIn, because that's our company page, because we're also writing a lot of articles and doing videos, etc., to again help support people during these really tough times, because we understand that a lot of people are going through a rough period out there. So please know we're here to help. Happy to provide coaching services to you, anything that you need. So let's talk about our agenda first of all. So we're going to talk about the 5 most common obstacles that we have found with our clients in terms of being a new manager. 10 tips to get ahead, but to begin incorporating into your strategic career plan to learn how to become a better manager. And we want you to walk away today with tangible, specific action steps that we want you to take as well, even if it's 2 or 3 in the next week that will build on the other ones, okay? And if any of you, in addition to the recording, so for those of you that are just joining us, this will be recorded. You will receive that automatically. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, the PowerPoint slides themselves, please feel free to email us for those at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to share those with you. We'll just send you a quick link to that. No problem at all. Okay? So let's talk about our 5 most common obstacles first. And we're going to do a couple of polls here today, 3 total actually. And I have to get better at launching these polls here. I think I'm getting there. So I'm a little practicing today because this is a newer system for us. But let's talk about these for a moment first, because these are actually really important. So the most common obstacles that we have found with our clients is, these on the slide. Your common obstacle may be something else, and that's okay. But I would recommend, first off, everyone, that you get out your piece of paper and write down, what do you think is the thing that you're struggling with the most as a new manager? because the sooner you identify what is in your way, what your greatest challenges are, the sooner obviously you'll be able to manage and deal with those. So for some people, they feel like, okay, I have this instant authority now, and I can just start telling people what to do, and they're not thinking enough maybe about their communication style. Some people, one of their obstacles may be that they're trying to maintain the same relationships with former coworkers where they're now their supervisor or things have changed. And you can't necessarily do that. You have to honor how your relationships have changed as a result of being promoted, for example. Some people and a lot of our clients actually struggle with this one is they're trying too hard to be liked. And they're having a hard time understanding how to be friendly, warm, and supportive, but also being direct and managerial, so to speak. Another one is some people think that their way of doing things is the only right way, and they're not taking enough time to really solicit feedback from their employees and ask the right questions and really kind of digging deep into what they're thinking. And finally, the last obstacle that we find is most common is not really fully understanding how much work goes into being a manager, and that can be overwhelming too. So let's go ahead and do this first poll if we could. Go ahead and look on your screen, everyone, if you would. Good. People are starting to participate in this. Go ahead and give us what your most common obstacle is, and I'll give you a moment here, just a second, and I'll show you guys the results. I love it when technology actually works. It's fantastic. I am tech savvy to a certain extent, but sometimes I struggle with it, just like I'm sure many of you do. Okay, so far we've got 50% feel that thinking being a boss gives you instant authority. Okay, that went to 25%. Then we've got the highest majority now is not knowing how much work goes into being a manager. Okay, good. I think we've got we've got everybody participating. Here are the results. So the majority of you, and I'm looking to the side here just because I've got that split screen, is not knowing how much work goes into being a manager. So good news that you're here today. It does take a lot of work. Please remember, though, that when you take any of the steps that we talk about today, it's going to have a big impact. So one of the things that I do want you all to know and understand is that even small baby steps can have a big impact and make a big improvement. So even though this may feel a little bit overwhelming, I get that. Know that even with small things, you'll have big results. And then the second two that we're between is thinking a boss. Being a boss gives you instant authority and trying to maintain the same relationship. So we'll talk about all of those today, okay? So let me turn this one off and we'll keep going. And please, though, as we said, write down your most common obstacle so that you can start to address that first. So identifying your top, I would say 2 obstacles to think about. Kind of take stock of, okay, how have things gone for me so far as a new manager? And do a quick assessment of where are my weak points? What's been going wrong? So identify your top 2 obstacles and develop a plan to address these first. So if it's managing how your relationships have changed, I would start to think about and have a little bit more open conversation with those people that the relationship has changed and you feel like you need to make some adjustments. Ask them some questions about how does it feel for you? How would you like to interact a little bit differently based on my new role? What would feel most comfortable for you and the most effective or productive? So you think about it as well, but have an open-ended and open, transparent conversation with people about how to change your work relationship. Some of our clients have found that as a new manager, they don't realize how much they need to actually communicate with their employees. And especially during this time of working remotely, you need to err on the side, everyone, of over communicating and provide more context than you would when you're in the office. So this goes for just being a new manager in general, but especially when we're working remotely, because you can't just pop into Bob or Joe or Susan's office down the hall. You need to err on the side of over communicating with your new employees, providing them with context and asking them questions about how are they doing? Are there, suggestions that you have for changes and input and giving me feedback? Okay. as part of this one, if you look at number 3 on the slide here, we don't want you to try to do all of this alone. So we encourage you to garner feedback and regularly ask for feedback and input as a new manager from your employees over time. This does not make you look like you're less confident and don't know what you're doing. It shows that you're open to feedback and soliciting it. You don't have to go with what they say. You're in charge of making the final decision. But the fact that you're willing to listen and interested in their input will go a long way with earning respect, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. So our first tip out of the 10 is to identify your top 2 obstacles so that you can assess where you need to make the first immediate changes, if you will. Okay. Tip number 2, and we talked about a little bit already, so the first one rolls right into this next one. You need to take some time to earn the respect of your employees, but also to establish that connection and solid relationships with them, especially during this time of working remotely, because we don't have that automatic sense of like corporate culture, or at least less so, because we're all in a different place. So you really need to take the time, especially as a new manager, to listen to your employees. Don't just gloss over something that they've said to you that's actually really important, that may inherently have like an issue that they're struggling with. And also take the time to listen to your peers and kind of get the sense first of what's the lay of the land with my group. How is everyone feeling? What are the social norms within my group and my team? And what are the dynamics that are going on? So don't just go in there and say, okay, I'm going to change everything and this is how it needs to be. First, pay attention to how things are so that you can make adjustments as needed, but understand what's already going on so that you're not stepping on toes too much. Being respectful of their time. Being respectful of their opinion. Again, this doesn't mean that you don't get to be in charge, take responsibility and make decisions. You have to do that. But being respectful of their opinions, time, everything else will go a long way for earning their respect, but also earning their trust. The third thing in terms of earning respect and establishing good relationships with them is don't forget to ask them questions. So don't just always go into meetings with, okay, here's what we need to do, whether it's a group meeting or a one-on-one. Ask them questions first to empower them and understand their perspective, then be authoritative. So what we mean by this is instead of just saying, okay, I think this is how we need to do this, ask them what their opinion is or what their thought is. So does anyone have any thoughts on how we should handle this problem or this issue? Even if you have an idea, and you know that your idea is the right one, that could be where you end up at the end of this. But asking for their feedback and input will empower them to make their own decisions and work independently, which is what you need because you can't do all of the work, right? And it will help build that connection, establish trust, and that two-way communication, okay? The other thing that we would suggest on this slide here too, to establish rapport and earn their respect, is to take time every single month to get to know and really understand what their strengths are, what their personality type is, and what their values are as well. So we would recommend that as part of your monthly meetings with each of your staff members, that you put a little note. You have a standard template agenda, and you put a little note at the top about, okay, let's check in on, are they leveraging their strengths on a regular basis? According to the Gallup Strengths Finder, that career assessment or strengths assessment, we need to be leveraging our strengths on a regular basis. And so you need to make sure that your teammates are in the right box, so to speak, on your team, and they're leveraging their strengths, and as a result, they're feeling fulfilled. You want to understand what their personality type is. Are they more introverted and extroverted? And if they're more extroverted, you need to give them enough kind of talk time with you, with other people as well. And if they're more introverted, if they're not speaking up on meetings as much, don't give them a hard time about it. Maybe they need to talk with you one-on-one instead or via email. And also take a moment to ask them about what their values are. Are they feeling fulfilled and rewarded by their role in being within the organization? So that you can understand not just how to play to their strengths in order for your team to be effective, but to make sure that they're kind of rocking and rolling and feeling fulfilled by what they do too. Because a happier employee is going to be a more productive employee. And then finally, as part of this earning respect and establishing rapport, we do need you to accept that your relationship with former coworkers has now changed. So you do need to start learning how to balance, having that relationship with them that may have been more like a peer and stronger sense of camaraderie in a different way, with now you need to be more authoritative. One way that you can deal with this, by the way, and then we'll go to our next slide here in tip number 3, is you can use the tool that coaches use. I'm going to put my, former coworker hat on, or I'm going to put my friend hat or my boss hat on at this time. You may need to kind of break out your conversations or meetings with these former coworkers and say, okay, right now I need to talk to you from this perspective, if you will, and then try on, this different perspective and let you know you need to speak with them, for example, as their boss at this point. That can help kind of separate the conversation and help into a different perspective without kind of it makes it more clear, and it kind of sets the stage for what the expectations would be based on what you need to communicate at that time. So try that kind of analogy of, okay, I'm going to put my boss hat on right now. That can help a lot in terms of adjusting or changing these relationships. Tip number 3 that we would highly recommend, especially for new managers, is if you don't have a mentor yet, and we'll do this poll here in just a moment, is to identify a mentor for yourselves inside or outside of your organization. We feel that kind of, especially for new managers, when this is kind of at the beginning stages for you, that having one of each, one inside your organization as well as one outside your organization, is really ideal, because within your organization you can get that inside perspective, but having one outside too can give you that objective perspective as well. We encourage you to set up regular meetings with them, monthly, for example. Could be, virtual coffee chat, for example, for 30 minutes. And ask them for very specific advice. Use their time wisely and be open to their feedback, obviously, as well. As part of this, keep in mind, some of us actually just forget to ask and find out if your company or organization has a formal mentoring program. You may want to check that out. If they don't have one, if that's something that you would like to start or recommend, feel free, obviously, to do that. But as part of this, as the mentoring, you may want to take advantage of, and we'll talk about this one in a little bit, but especially with being, everyone working remotely, we have a lot of clients taking online classes from LinkedIn Learning, from Coursera.org, et cetera, and we'll talk about those more in a second. But take advantage now of training programs for new managers as well, like a course that's like a 5-week course or whatever it is, just to help you kind of get your sea legs with this too. If for any reason, especially, you're having a hard time identifying a mentor. One of the things I wanted to say here too, and let's start this second poll here, is curious how many people out there today have a mentor currently. This is one of the places, by the way, that you can leverage your LinkedIn Georgia Tech alumni group to identify someone who's within your industry, who's much more senior than you, to find out if they'd be willing to be an informal mentor to you, if they're willing to meet monthly for 30 minutes or every other month or whatever it is. This is a place that you can leverage that alumni network, because you've got that warm kind of connection already. They're more likely to get back with you and more likely to give you some time. And Len, if you have any suggestions for this, please feel free to share kind of as we're going here today. So far, let me show the results. We've got 70% do not have a mentor and 30% do. So good for you, those 30% that have one already. 70% totally understand. That's why we're here today. We want you to work on finding a mentor. Please understand that this is not a snap of your fingers. It's going to happen overnight type of thing. It can take a little bit of time. You may need to ask several people to find the right fit, and that's okay. But we want you to start now so that you get someone sooner than later. Okay? So tip number 4, and let me move this slide here. Apologies, guys. So tip number 4 is to make sure that, especially as a new manager, you're continuously enhancing your skill set. Okay? So we want you to include in your strategic career plan, we want you to include coursework. It doesn't have to be everything tomorrow. If you're anything like me, I try to take on too much at once. And I do a lot better if I have my annual plan and I say, okay, that's in Q4. Leave it there. It's written down. You don't have to do it all right now. So we want you to include coursework once you've identified your top obstacles, as we said, and you understand and do that assessment of, okay, where am I doing well and where am I not doing so well? We want you to include this coursework. You can ask your supervisor for possible ideas or your HR department. Some of the internet courses that we like, lynda.com, actually, everyone, it was purchased by LinkedIn. So now that's LinkedIn Learning. Highly recommend that one. Coursera.com as well is very good. You can also take a look at industry-specific courses. So check out your industry association because they may have some online courses as well or recommended courses that would be specific to your industry, which would be great. Consider also certifications. These are becoming more and more common and more acceptable these days, especially given online and remote work, that you can get an online certification in some cases, and our clients will put that on their resume and on their LinkedIn profile. Check out college courses as well. Anything that Georgia Tech might be doing or within your local community, if there are any community college courses that they're moving towards online. One of the ways that you can identify some really good coursework is to research the LinkedIn profiles of people who are in higher level positions at your organization or outside of it, and what qualifications do they have that you think you need to work on, or relevant education. You can also, and we would highly recommend this can piggyback on helping you identify a mentor, is conduct informational interviews with people in those higher level positions. So as a new manager, it's a really good idea to talk with your supervisor and those in higher level positions to just do, again, quick coffee chat informational interview with them to find out what are the tips and tricks that, the things that they have learned and that they remember from being a new manager that they would say now, looking back, what I would do differently. So this can be part of and needs to be part of your annual career plan too. Tip number 5 is to take initiative and take more initiative, especially during these times of working remotely. We talked about this one a little bit earlier. Err on the side of over communicating and be really sure during these times to provide a little bit more context to your employees about why we're working on this specific project, what the results are supposed to be, and how things look. You may need to hold people's hands a little bit more because, again, we lack that context and ability to just get context from being in the office, okay? So number 1 is to over-communicate as one way of taking initiative. Number 2 is take the time to not just listen to the tasks and meetings, but also observe and pay attention to and learn to emulate or work on emulating the soft skills that you notice other managers and leaders within your organization have. So what are those soft skills that they have? Are they really good at staying calm under pressure during these difficult times? Like we said, Len and I were talking about this before we got started today. It is so important for you all as a manager these days to be calm and cool given everything else that's going on, because that is going to set the tone for your team enormously to just take things in stride. Understand when someone's kid runs behind them, on a video chat. Let them know that that's okay and that we're all in this together. You need to set the tone for your team. And the more you do that, the calmer they're going to be. So you need to take these things in stride and use your own support network to get things off your chest and everything else so that when you're with your team and your employees, you can be calm and cool under pressure and help them get to the right place stress level wise too. And then finally, in terms of taking initiative, and I would say this one is on the low end of the priority list, but you do want to keep it in mind, especially now that we're working remotely. We need to start building your brand on social media. And when I say that, I mean specifically LinkedIn, ideally, and within your industry and your organization. So as a new manager and as a leader within your organization, we encourage you to start participating on LinkedIn more than you would have otherwise if you were in the office, okay? Because this is a way to network, get your name out there, but also start to Share articles with your team and your LinkedIn connections that are supportive, positive, that are industry specific, how to solve this specific problem, whatever it is. So share articles, start kind of writing articles on LinkedIn, even if it's just once a month, it's something really short, but start to build your brand as a new manager over time, because as you start to do that on LinkedIn, it's just going to build upon itself. Tip number 6 is to be confident. So I'm honestly a fan of fake it till you make it a little bit. Okay, I did that when I was a new manager a long time ago in my first position before I started my coaching practice. Our attitude to things, as we all know and understand, especially during these times, it's critical. Your attitude affects your actions, which in turn obviously affects your outcome. And when we start with new clients, new coaching clients, 85% of our clients will tell us that they are actually their biggest obstacle to whatever their career goal is. We tend to get in our own way. So part of what you want to do in your self-assessment of what obstacles you're struggling with, where are the areas that you feel less confident? So I would highly recommend taking 2 days, full days, to kind of write down not just where you're spending your time in each of those days, but where you feel really good as a manager and where you're feeling a little less confident. So for example, are you noticing that, after you take this, kind of recording for 2 days of what's going on, when you talk to a specific person, does it make you more nervous and you feel less confident? When you're leading a specific team meeting or talking about a certain project or topic. So you need to notice kind of what your patterns and themes and trends are in terms of feeling more confident and less so. And those are the areas you want to focus on the most, developing affirmations for those areas. Like, I know I can do this because of X, Y, and Z. Watch your body language when you're talking to people. So if there's someone specific, for example, that is a little bit more intimidating to you, stand up when you talk to them. Sit up straight when you're conducting your team call. So standing up gets us into a more confident posture, and having those affirmations, maybe even a list of your accomplishments and achievements, that would be great too. Anything that you need to do to kind of boost your confidence. And as I said at the beginning here of this one, it's okay to kind of fake it till you make it. If you've got like a playlist that you need to play some music right before you have a team call that will pump you up a little bit before you hop on, and then afterwards you need to step outside for a minute, that's okay. But start to pay attention to and work on your confidence overall, because that will impact how you come across and therefore impact your results, as we said. Tip number 7 is to specifically think about, and on this next slide here, we have a leadership wheel that is a self-assessment we want you to do after our webinar today. Because tip number 7 is to work on and develop your leadership skills. So some of the examples that we would like you to focus on first are on this slide, and then we'll take a look at the leadership wheel next. As a leader and a new manager, you really need to learn how to motivate others, just like we were talking about before. Understand not just what your own strengths are as a leader and communicate what those are effectively so that people can understand how they can work with you more effectively, but understand what their values are, what motivates them, what their strengths are, so that you ensure that you're giving and assigning the right work to the right people. Take a leadership role in your meetings, obviously, and within your team. But pay attention to and start to evaluate, what kind of leader are you? Are you the type of person that really likes to get your hands dirty and get into the project and the nitty-gritty? Or do you tend to be more the type of person that wants to give really specific details and examples of how they need to handle something and let people work a little bit more independently? Understanding what your leadership style and communicating that to others is going to help you work together more effectively with them and help them understand how to best support you. Another leadership strength that is so important these days is to be able to handle conflict effectively, and also be able to, again, handle crisis and difficult emotional situations effectively. And one of the ways we would recommend, or a resource that I would recommend for you all, is check out the book Emotional Intelligence. I'm sure you all have heard about this before. Really good kind of basics for EI, emotional intelligence. Really, really helpful to develop those soft skills. because having these soft skills as a manager and leader is just so critically important. I don't want to say that it's more important than those tangible, hard skills, but in some cases, I absolutely do think that that is the case. So this is something that a lot of people kind of overlook and forget about because they just say, oh, that's touchy-feely, I don't need to worry about it as much. This is the thing that's going to enable you to be the most effective leader if you have that emotional intelligence. So please do pay attention to it. We work with clients on these things all the time, and it makes a huge difference when they deal with that emotional intelligence piece. Let's take a look at this leadership wheel here. So I highly recommend that you download this, get a copy of the PowerPoint, like we said, download this and print it out. To do two things here, to do a quick self-assessment of where you fall on this leadership wheel. So here's the deal here. These are the top 10 leadership skills that Development Dimensions International, which is a very highly regarded management consulting firm, asserts that are the most important leadership skills or strengths in today's workplace, okay? Some of them may be relevant for your workplace or not. So for example, if you don't have as many intercultural and teams, that's something. If your company or organization is not international, that may be a little bit different too. But look, these days, pretty much everybody is. So I would say count all of them. But what you want to do is print this out and rank yourself on how well you're doing on each of these 10 areas. On a scale of 1 to 10, obviously 10 would be fantastic. So rate yourself first. And then I would highly recommend that you ask your supervisor as well as your employees to rank you on these areas as well, to just do kind of a double check of if your self-assessment is actually correct. And then identify, based on those two results, identify your top 3 areas for improvement and development, where you need to improve, because this is also going to help you understand what you need to put into your strategic career plan to really focus on. What are those muscles that you need to strengthen and develop? Okay, so this leadership wheel, fantastic, really good self-assessment. If any of you, I wanted to mention this really quickly, and then we'll get to our next few tips here, and we will have a few minutes for Q&A at the end, everyone, just by the way. If any of you feel like you need some additional advice on anything we're talking about today or anything else in terms of your professional goals, we would be happy to offer you a free career strategy session to talk with you about those, give you some additional advice, because we realize too that some of your situations may be very specific and unique, given what we're talking about today. And also, as part of that, we'll talk to you about our coaching services and how we can assist you with those goals as well in the long term, especially with helping you develop your long-term strategic career plan, which can be a little bit overwhelming for people. Totally get it. Tip number 8 as a new manager is to really be mindful of asking for and implementing constructive criticism or feedback. So here's the deal with this one. I think as new managers, a lot of times we think, oh, we're supposed to know everything. And so if we ask someone else's opinion, we won't look like we know what we're doing, and it will make us seem weaker or less confident, et cetera, et cetera. We completely disagree with that. There is a time and a place, obviously, for you to take a stand, make a decision, move on. And we can't be soliciting feedback for a whole team meeting, obviously, okay? But we do want you to set the tone and the stage for being open to, but also asking for and soliciting feedback. And remembering, obviously, and letting your employees know that my way isn't always the right way. I want to hear your opinion and your judgment and your thoughts. The incorrect response, obviously, to getting or dealing with and addressing feedback is to dismiss it, blame the other person, or criticize them. Really bad. The correct response, obviously, is to accept that feedback, implement those changes, and improve your leadership style or strengths based on what they said to you. So as part of your one-on-one meetings, okay, with your team, as well as your team meetings, you want to ask for and implement this feedback and ask them, how are things going? How are you doing? Are there processes and systems we need to change? So make sure that that's part of your standard template agenda so that you're soliciting that feedback over time. And it's not just about telling them what to do. Tip number 9, we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, and this is about building your brand. Writing, sharing, commenting on articles on LinkedIn, One of the ways to possibly find a mentor, everyone, and especially these days since we're not doing in-person networking, is to start to participate in LinkedIn groups. I know a lot of you probably have joined LinkedIn groups. I have in the past as well. Have I used them? No, I haven't, because I leveraged in-person networking instead. These days, since we don't have that, we highly recommend you start to join and leverage those LinkedIn groups that you're part of. That could be a place that you can solicit advice about being a new manager, but also to identify a possible mentor too. Consider, as a new manager, writing articles for an industry blog or association newsletter. Again, so that you're doing this research, you're showing you that you're a thought leader, but you're staying on top of trends in order to demonstrate that to your team and educate your team over time as well. In the long run, you may want to consider serving on the board of an industry association, presenting at a conference, even if it's virtually in the next year, and even in some cases, volunteering your time for projects outside of your department in order to show people that, I'm being a leader, I'm stepping up to the plate. So we're curious for this last and final poll here, how many of you are currently active on LinkedIn? You post things, you participate in LinkedIn groups, you're not just letting it sit there stagnant, which I know a lot of us do. So we've got 50-50 so far. Okay, we'll give it just a moment here for you all to participate. It goes up and down, but we're kind of here at 50-50 still. Okay, great. So we want you to be more active on LinkedIn. What I would say in terms of a general schedule, everyone, especially now that we're working remotely, is I would ask you to once a week set aside time for about 15 to 20 minutes every single week. It doesn't have to be that long for you to check your LinkedIn messages, comment and post, connect with people on your LinkedIn groups, and just kind of read that feed really quickly to see what else you can identify and find that you need to learn as a new manager. So we've got 50-50 for this last poll. Thank you for participating in that. So just be mindful for this tip number 9 of building your brand over time, everyone, as a new leader, because that will help position you for the next step up and allow you to get involved in other projects within your organization that you may want to in the long run. Tip number 10, and our final tip for today, is to keep an accomplishments document of how you're doing as a leader. So based on your new role, what are the testimonials and the kudos you're getting from people? You want to put those in a Word document so you're keeping track of what's going well, as well as at the bottom, you may want to say, these are the things I need to improve, like we talked about. Kudos from clients or employees, skills and experience that you're gaining. Because what happens to us over time, when it's time for us to go for that next promotion, we forget all of these little nuggets. So we do want you to keep kind of a brag book for yourselves so that you're keeping track of what your accomplishments over time, so that you can educate your, the next supervisor on those, but also get that next promotion when it's time. Take about 10 to 15 minutes every month to update this document so that you're keeping it up to date, okay, consistently and regularly. All right, let's start to close out my kind of talking points here of our webinar. And I'd like you all to get out your piece of paper, please, or your computer, whatever, wherever you take notes, and identify for just a moment here 2 action steps that you will take in the next week based on what you feel are your biggest obstacles to being a success as a new manager from what we talked about today. Is it that the examples on the slide here, you need to start asking for a little bit more feedback? You really haven't done that as much. Is it that you need to start an accomplishments, but also my challenges document so that I can start to develop what my strategic career plan is? Or finally, it could be, hey, I need to schedule that complimentary strategy session. Like I said, we work with new managers all the time, as well as senior managers, on how they need to improve their management skills. And we train them on critical coaching skills that are enormously helpful to get them to be a better leader and manager as well. These coaching skills are fantastic. So please feel free to schedule that with us. It's admin@HallieCrawford.com, and we will send you a scheduling link to get that set up. I'm going to go ahead and scroll over here to our Q&A box. If anyone has any questions they want to ask us, feel free to do that, okay? We do have one quick question. I'm going to bring up this next slide here for a moment. That's about our career coaching services here, and then we'll wrap up here in just a few moments after we're done with the Q&A. I did want to offer everyone a coupon, a discount on our services, just for people who've participated in our webinar today on our coaching services, because we know people need help today and some are struggling. We get that. So one of our questions is, how often should I be checking in with my employees on their strengths and their values, et cetera, that we talked about? I would definitely check in with your employees once a month on those at the very beginning until you get to know them over time. You don't have to be doing this, forever, but at the very beginning, especially when you're trying to get to know and understand what your employees' needs are, what their strengths are, et cetera, this is a really great way to hop on a video chat with them so that you can make that connection with them and establish that connection more effectively. But put it at the top of your agenda each time as part of your check-in with them for how things are going, especially during this difficult time. And from that conversation with them, you'll start to understand a little bit more what their strengths are, what their values are, what their priorities are, but also partly what their frustrations are, what they need from you in order for you to be a more effective leader and manager for them specifically. Great question. I hope that helped you. Any other questions that we've got here? Please feel free to use the Q&A box here. Some of my employees, here's the next one. Some of my employees are not as vocal when they have an issue, even if I ask directly. This is a great question. How do we navigate the conversation so that they can identify their needs? This is great. A lot of employees it could be because they're more introverted. It could just be because they're shy, whatever. They may not state or fully understand what their needs are. Here's what we would recommend is over time, continuing to ask them the question will help demonstrate to them that you actually want to know the answer and force them to kind of think about this a little bit more too. So what I would do is continue to ask the question, but obviously in the moment, you don't want to force the answer. If they have an answer, great. If they don't, ask them to think about it and get back with you, because people who are more introverted, actually like I am, than more extroverted. I'm 60% introvert, 40% extrovert. It takes me a little bit of time to think about things. So ask them and say, look, noodle on that for me a little bit and check in with me, and check in with them later in the week about it when they've had a chance to think about it. Okay. The other thing is you could go into the meeting with some ideas about what some of their issues and needs might be. So I would prompt them and give them some advice or suggestions about what some of those issues are as well, because that can help a little bit too. And then over time, just know that this will get better and it will improve over time as you're prompting them to think about it and kind of reminding them to consider it a little bit more. Let me know if that helped answer that first question for me, if you will. Just give me a quick yes there, if you would. That would be great. I think we've got another one. Okay, here we go. So this will help with employees that are a little bit more introverted and don't understand what their needs are. That was a great question. So we've got one more question in terms of, okay, how do I provide more context for my employees so that they understand what my expectations are? One of the things that we would do, this is a great question, is when you have a conversation over the phone about something, I would always follow up with an email with the notes from the meeting, the action items, and everything else. Make sure that you've got everything kind of wrapped up in a bow with a follow-up email so that your employees have everything in writing in case they have a question. So don't just leave the meeting and, okay, we've had this conversation, everything's, perfect and great. Make sure that you follow up each time with an email so that everyone has it in writing and understands what those expectations are. Okay? Feel free to ask any more questions. I'm going to pull up contact information in case any of you want to contact us. If you have further questions later on, we're happy to answer those. So don't hesitate to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. Even if it's weeks out, feel free to ask those questions. One of the things that I wanted to kind of close out with today before we go, and just as a quick reminder, everyone, you will get a copy of the recording within the next 48 hours of our webinar today. And also, if you'd like the PowerPoint slides, just email us, admin@halliecrawford.com. I know that some of the things that we talked about today may feel like, oh, I have to step out of my comfort zone. This feels a little bit uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. The quote that has always gotten me through difficult times in my professional and my career, but also when there's something that I don't feel like doing because it's just not in my comfort zone, is the greatest risk in life is not taking one. Remember, everyone, that without risk, there's no reward. So push yourself, take a chance, speak up in your meetings, ask the tough questions, see what happens. You can always kind of adjust and fix things later. This is a learning process. So also, and finally, be patient with yourselves as a new manager. Realize that this is a skill that can be improved over time. You just need to be patient and persistent with yourself and your employees. Len, is there anything that you'd like to share before we go today in terms of resources or anything else?
Well, I appreciate everyone's participation with the in the program today. Please be sure and check our Alumni Association website for additional career resources, whether it's our website or JacketNet Jobs, which is where we post all of our open positions, and we've been surprised pleasantly that jobs keep coming into that resource. So, and they want specifically Georgia Tech alumni because they value that. So I really encourage you to have your information updated on there. Hallie kind of alluded to this, and she mentioned it in her previous webinar. Really updating that LinkedIn profile is so critical. And to put something on your calendar every week or so and take a look at LinkedIn and respond to people and network sometimes makes all the difference. And you can find those mentors and those sounding boards out there, and perhaps you can be one to someone else. So that's what makes that Georgia Tech network, even more powerful than it already is when you share your insight and expertise with someone else. So we appreciate you being on the program today, and thank you so much, and go Jackets.
Thank you, Len. I know I put you on the spot because I said I was going to close things out. Right. Fantastic, because it's a good reminder for everyone. Good luck, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. Please, if you have additional questions, even later on, as we said, feel free to email us. We'd be happy to help. Have a great day. Stay safe and well.